Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
We spent a lot of time on verse 11. We may have even read verse 12.
Nope.
You never read verse 12?
No, we left off at 12 with the Rashi.
Right, like we referenced it because the storyline, the Rashi comments kind of rely on your knowing a little bit more about what happens in the upcoming scenes. Well, let's start by reading verse 12, and then we'll jump into the Rashi. Did we actually parse verse 12 slowly last week? No?
Not in the Rashi.
No, but in the verse itself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did. I marked that we're just on the Rashi now.
Okay. So then let me read the...
I think we read it, but we didn't really discuss some of the, didn't really go into it deeply.
Okay. So let me read the verse to get us going, and then we'll assign a reader for Rashi. So verse 12, Vayifein ko bacho, yes, remember we read this, that he turned, panah, the word is panah, pei nun hey, he, Moshe, turned ko bacho, here and there. Vayar ki ein ish, and he saw there was no man. And I remember telling you, like, just be alert to how the word ish is used in this whole story, and you get the flow of it if you read through without doing this pausing for the Rashi that we're doing. But just notice in the previous verse, in verse 11, that there was a Vayar ish mitzri, that Moshe saw Egyptian man. In this verse, he's saying ein ish, there's no man. In the next verse, they're going to be Shnei Anashim, two Israelite men who are fighting. And in the next verse, the Israelites are going to kind of accuse Moshe of, why are you trying to be an ish to us? So it's not a coincidence that word is used all the way through. What it actually means is up for us to decide. So Vayar ki ein ish, he saw there was no man. Vayach et ha-Mitzri, he smote the Egyptian, which we assume to mean that he killed him. Vayit menehu bacho, and he hid him, he obscured him in the sand. Okay. So pretty standard Hebrew words. There are certainly leftover questions as to what phrases connote, right? What does it mean that he saw that there was no man? Rashi's obviously going to pick up on that. And what does ko bacho mean? So that's the verse itself. Let's pause here for any questions or comments on the verse before we go to Rashi. Rick, bavakasha.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to say the proper way to lane ko vacho is you can go left or right. It's optional, but you go ko this way and you go vacho that way or the other way. Just thought I'd let you know.
Proper or shtick or both? Proper shtick? Yes, you can act out that verse, right? Okay. Questions or comments? By the way, if there are people who are joining who haven't been joining recently, if you don't have the actual book in front of you, you can pull up the Rashi on Sefaria just by going to the chapter of the of Shemot, Sefaria.org, sefaria.org, chapter 2, verse 12. Click on the verse. It'll open up commentaries on the side. You can click on Rashi. Okay. Questions or comments on the verse? Things that don't make sense, things that you imagine Rashi or not Rashi would want to explore more deeply before we go into the Rashis.
The word vayach.
What about it?
It's a word I'm not familiar with.
Aha. So the root is hey, kaf, hey, or sometimes mem, kaf, hey, but the root is really hey, kaf, hey, to smite. You know it from Parshat Mishpatim, makeh ish mot yumat, right? If you smite a man, that he will be, you give up your own life. You know it from the Haggadah's way of referring to the 10 plagues. Eser, makot, same root, to smite. So we played this. We played with this a little bit in the previous verse when it was Makeh ish ivri me'echav. Remember that Rashi read that what the Egyptian man was doing to the Israelite was not killing him, but tormenting him. right? Even though, and the reason why Rashi has to work hard to get us there is because Rashi knows that biblically speaking, lehakot means to smite, to smack in order to kill. But as the language developed, you can also use maket to mean to smite with the plague and to torment, right? But most of the times in the Torah, including in this verse, it means to kill. And the reason why it's vayach is because the third letter of the root is a hey, and when you have a three-letter root with a third letter of the root is a hey, and you're putting it in the future tense or the vav hayipuch, then the hey drops off. So it's really should have been vayakeh, but the hey falls off to vayach, like vayivk is how you say, and he cried. The hey of vayivkeh falls off in that formulation.
This makes no sense, I'm sure, to anybody, not even to me. But for some reason, yah, just it sounds to me, feels to me like rach, which is soft. So it makes the makah sort of soft. I don't know why, and I don't know if anybody else feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, even the ka, the hard kaf of the root lahakot, is softened, pun intended. It's rach. It's made more rach by having the kaf be turned into the chav. It's in this case, Larry, it's raw grammar, but it doesn't mean that it can't be evocative. Nayor, you got the verse. Okay. Let's see, Sue Marshall Berry.
Well, I just wanted to say that we've had this with the mysterious ish is not something that we haven't seen before, and
right.
In the past, and Rashi doesn't really go into the mysterious ish here. I don't think. Did I miss it? But
listen, Rashi will talk about the anashim in the next verse, but doesn't spend much time on the ish of this verse.
So the ish that we don't know who they are or if they were really there. Don't we have an ish with a lot of scenes, an unknown ish that is sometimes an angel and sometimes not, and we're sometimes not sure they were actually there. We had Yonatan and David, and there's always an ish. There seems to be a mysterious ish placed exactly where the mysterious ish needs to be, or in this case, needs not to be, like they were apparitions.
Yeah. I think the one that most people go to their minds is the ish who directs Yosef to where his brothers are in Dotan, right?
That's the one I was thinking of.
Ehu ish, and ish found him, and there are many sermons written on what we're supposed to be pulling out of the fact that a random ish on the road can change everything. Like can be a Robert Frostian decision as to which path to take. Marshall, Barry, and then Tova.
Again, focusing Sue was on ki ein ish. What does it mean, ish? Is there anybody present, or is there anybody who's manly enough? Are you a man?
Yeah.
Step forward and do something. So maybe Moses says, well, if there isn't, maybe I got to do something.
Yes. So
Marshall, that really, b'makom she'ein ish tieh.
That's right.
So it's possible that that rabbinic witticism, literally b'makom she'ein ish hishtadel liot ish, in a place. Sorry, I think it's b'makom she'ein anashim, in the place there are no men, people. This is from Pirkei Avot. Hishtadel, try, liot ish, to try to be a man. So the fact that that rabbinic witticism asks you to become an ish where there are no anashim suggests that their read of the anashim and the many times that ish appears in the Torah is a suggestion of not just literal presence, but some kind of a moral presence, right? And you could read that very well into this verse, right? Vayifen kovako. You look here and there. Vayar ki ein ish. The simplest reading is probably, he saw there was no man, meaning what? He could do it without being caught. Right? That's probably the simplest pshat. Right? He saw there's no one around. Right? The same thing like, when a kid sneaks a cookie from the cabinet. Or, vayar ki ein ish, he saw there was no other person who was going to stand up to this injustice, and so he resolved that his only option was to take it upon himself, right? That's a plausible reading. It's certainly a plausible reading back from the rabbinic notion that lihiyot ish, to be a man. I know it's gendered in this way, but try to hear it ungendered. It's sometimes impossible to ungender Hebrew. What it means is to stand up and be human in a way that some people fail to do. That's very plausible reading. Barry, and then Tova, and then Larry Diane.
Well, there's been so much wisdom already. I don't know what I can add now. First is Ish Misri. Now there's no Ish. Does that mean that if Israelite Anashim were watching, they don't count? He's only concerned whether there's an Ish Mitzri. The other is no Ish washing. It reminds me of Adam and Eve and the killing, and where are you hiding, and there's no Ish. Well, there's always an Ish, and immediately upon him killing this Mitzri, there's an Ish or Anashim.
Yeah. Everett Fox, whom we know goes to pains to really translate the Torah in a way that is sensitive to the Hebrew, but also reads well in English. And sometimes he puts in occasional parentheses. He's loath to do it because he wants the Hebrew to speak for itself, but sometimes to make the English expression work, you have to. The way he translates this verse, he turned this way and that way, and seeing that there was no man, he puts in parentheses there, right? Like, Everett Fox does not want to read this midrashically as seeing there was no man who was going to stand up to do the right and the good, but literally there was no man there, and his comment on it is, although some have interpreted that as quote unquote this as no man around to help, the expression taken in context would seem to indicate that Moshe was afraid of being seen. This incident reveals Moshe's concern and early leanings towards being a liberator, but also demonstrates his youthful lack of forethought. So it's by Everett Fox putting in the word there and disabusing us of trying to read it midrashically, he's actually sharpening why it's so interesting to read it midrashically. That what does it mean that there was no man? Tova, Larry, Diane, Alexandra, Matt, and then we're going to read a Rashi.
Well, I concur that there's been a lot of wisdom already, but one of the things that sort of was clashing in my brain a little bit is that the scenes up until now, and certainly just the previous verse, seems populated. He goes down to see his brethren, and he sees this man tormenting in some way someone, and then he looks right and left, or he looks here and there, and suddenly there is no Ish. There are no men. So there's some of a sort of a clash there. And I guess what's suggesting in my mind is, in a way, a lack of impulsivity, that he has held back, he has waited until that's the case. But then there's also the contradiction later that he is observed. Evidently there were men there because it's known what happened. So I'm sort of trying to find a hold on putting all that together.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tova, to see that contrast in these few short words that open up our reading Moshe as either extremely mature, grown up, morally grounded, and thoughtful, or impetuous and have not yet learned how to be an adult. Remember Tova's comment to everybody when Rashi comments, probably not this week, but probably next week, on the verse of the word Ish 2 verses from now, right? So I said that the word Ish or Anashim appears in all these verses. Rashi's reading in verse 14 of the word Ish is very evocative of what Tova just shared. So Baruch Shekivant, well done. Okay, Larry, Diane, Alexandra, Matt, and then we're going to read a Rashi.
I love the ambiguity in the verse, or the first part of the verse, and Alter also points it out. So I'd just like to offer 2 alternative interpreted translations.
Well done. 2 alternative translations.
There you go. So he turned this way and that, and seeing that no one was watching him, ... you go one way, okay, kol v'cho, or looking this way and that, and seeing that there was no one else to step forward,
Yeah. ...
If you translate them interpretively that in one of the two ways, then you have to go one way or the other. But here, the kol v'cho is in fact refers to the way you can interpret the whole verse.
Nice. You're saying that the language itself, like form matching content, that the verse suggests a this way and that way of reading the verse about his turning this way and that way. Lovely. Alexandra.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm wondering, there's a Maimonides, probably, for me, it's going to be a misquote, most likely, but he said something like, God speaks to those who have achieved a level of self-perfection in order to guide them to their purpose. The idea that like prophecy is earned and not necessarily like inherently born into that person. And so I was thinking that this might be the pivotal moment for him, that the looking right and left could be that pivotal, that this is the moment he decides to step up and do something. And this is the moment that he changes who he is and his whole destiny, possibly.
Yeah. And particularly when you think about the root lifnot, right? By Yifin, he turned, right? God turns to us. There's a spiritual valence to turning in the Jewish tradition. Again, it could also just mean that it literally means he turned, right? He swiveled. But it could be a kind of an internal turning as he tries to figure out who Moshe is going to be. And that's how Ever Fox reads it. This is Moshe pre-liberator, right? I remember there was in the Big Book of Jewish Humor, which was my Bible growing up. I used to read it cover to cover every time I visited my grandparents in New York City, by Moshe Waldox. There was some cartoon in there of Moshe as a child, and it's him sitting over his cereal bowl, splitting the milk, one side to the other, right? Kind of a whimsical way of understanding childhood Moshe. So this is also even before he knew before the burning bush, before any of that, there was some sense that he was meant to turn this way and that, see what the circumstances are, and liberate the Israelites. So yeah. Okay, Matt, and then I'm gonna put a line at Matt, and then we're gonna read some Rashis, and the others remember what you were gonna say. Matt.
Okay, very briefly, three things. One, lifnot kol v'cho. It would be fun to translate that as he faced here and there, because panim lifnot.
Yes.
Okay. Two, to paraphrase Freud, sometimes an ish is just an ish.
Yes.
And thirdly, to quote incorrectly from memory, Shalom Aleichem, Tevye welcomes someone to his barn or whatever. Shalom Aleichem visits him and he welcomes him and he offers him some hospitality, and he says, "B'makom she'ein ish" is herding a fish. So b'makom, whereas when there's nobody around, then herring is poor people's food, but it's good enough to offer. It's what I have. So.
Wait, I miss it. But b'makom she'ein ish is herring a fish. What am I guessing?
Well, just translate it. The words are the same in English. B'makom she'ein ish, herring is a fish. Meaning it's not really a good fish. It's not a trout. It's a salty something or other.
I see. Interesting.
He's justifying his poor hospitality.
Got it.
But he relies on this pasuk from us, the Makom She'ein Ish.
Got it. Okay. Let's move forward because we're almost halfway through the class and we haven't even read a Rashi yet. So, Matt, since you're unmuted, do you want to read the Rashi on Vayifin Kol V'cho?
Yes, give me just 1 second. And I won't be embarrassed like I was last time.
By the way, as you were quoting Shalom Aleichem and Tevye with your beard, I'm not sure which one you look like more, but at least one of them.
More like Tevye. Shalom Aleichem had a very neat goatee, I think. Okay, Vayifin Kol V'cho. Ra'a me asalo בבית ומה עשה לו בשדה ולפי פשוטו.
So pause, because that's the end of his first comment.
Okay.
Once he goes ulafi pshuto, we know that up until now he's offering a nice little midrashic explanation.
Okay, right. Good.
Okay.
All right. So he saw what was being done to him in the house. What he did to him in the house. What he had done to him in the house, and what he did to him in the field there.
Right. So this is why sometimes pausing, in the flow of verses makes it hard to understand Rashi's flow of comments. Does anyone remember what he is referring to here? Rashi is being somewhat self-referential. What's he referring to here? Matt, do you remember?
No. There's a parenthesis outside the house, the beating to which he had subjected him. Right. No, that's not.
So if you remember,
I don't remember a previous beating.
Larry, Diane, your hand is up.
Well, he's referring to the rape of his wife. Okay. I forget the Shlomit.
Yes.
Who the taskmaster had raped in the house, and then had beaten the Hebrew outside the house. Those are the two things he's referring to.
Right. So Rashi is saying, quoting basically the same source, that the Vayifein Kovacho is not sometimes a cigar is not a cigar, and sometimes turning here and there is not just turning here and there, and sometimes turning is a more lofty spiritual turning. He was able to see, and the original version of the Midrash includes the word Ruach HaKodesh. Through Ruach HaKodesh, through divine intervention, Moshe discerned the whole story, right? Don't like what any teacher or parent wishes they were able to do when they see the aftermath of a kerfuffle, right? It would be great to know exactly what happened. You don't know what happened. You have to guess. How do you impose discipline when you don't know who did what? So Moshe turned this way and that way, meaning he saw a vision of everything that had happened out there in the house when the Egyptian had woken up the Israelite early, gotten him out to go work, and then raped his wife. And then he saw what happened out there in the field when the Egyptian taskmaster had specifically set upon and maked, not maked to kill, but maked to torment the Israelite. And Moshe got it, right? He had a nevuah. He had an ability to assess the entirety of the situation. And the reason why that is significant midrashically is, and you can fill in the blank if you want in your head, if he didn't know exactly what happened, how would he possibly be justified taking the action he's about to take? Right? If he wasn't exactly sure what the circumstances were, that this was not just your regular, taskmaster doing his job, but even a more pernicious version of it, then how is Moshe justified in doing haka'ah, in doing smiting, which is the same verb used to describe what the Egyptian did to the Israelite? That's the midrashic interpretation according to Rashi through the midrash. Norm, and then Larry, and then we'll go back to Matt.
I had just wanted to say, reacting to something Tova had said, that if we were simply looking right and left to see that there were no witnesses, nonetheless, we could expect that the Israelite he saved is going to talk about it. People knew he was being beaten, and they absented themselves, and then he shows up alive and more or less well, as they are expecting to have to come and collect the body. He shows up alive and well, and they're going to say, whatever happened? This guy came from the palace dressed like an Egyptian nobleman, and he killed this guy who was tormenting me and saved my life. And believe me, within the oppressed community, that's a story that would get out very, very fast.
Yeah, great, Norm. Thank you. Larry, Diane?
I'll be done by 9.
So, in terms of the Rashi, I think we have to identify who the he's are. So the Rashi Ra'ama Asa Lo Babayit should be, and he, Moses, saw what he, the Mitzri, had done to him, the Ivri.
Correct.
But notice what happened in the house? The Mitzri raped Shlomit. So the feminists should have jumped in here, not me. I am a feminist. That what was done was not to him; it was done to his wife. But from Rashi's perspective, it's actually an offense against the husband.
Yeah.
And I think I commented last week about the fact that the adultery is a crime against the husband, not against the wife here.
Yeah, and it's a sensitive read there. It's an important read. One could respond to it by saying that what it's referring to on the me'asalo bayit is not the rape, which is being understood as an offense to the husband, but the lying in wait, the waking him up early, the making the house more possible for the rape to take place, which began with an interaction between the taskmaster and the husband. But I still accept your comment. You're right that it's just a different worldview, very, very, very different from ours in terms of understanding who is the real victim there. And also remember that to be somewhat true to the text, the wife doesn't appear in the story. That's all midrashic, right? The only victim in the text is the man, right? So you can also understand the Rashi put it that way. Yes, Neora, we're in Exodus Shemot, not Deuteronomy Devarim, chapter 2, verse 12. Okay, Barry, and then Matt's going to continue with the Rashi.
Well, I want to go back to Alexander, what you had said, and then pick up the line that you're bringing us now, Rabbi Kligfeld, because it's very interesting. So, as Alexander said, this is a turning point for Moshe. So God is turning Moshe. This is his first prophetic moment. So God is opening to Moshe this vision. This is his first turning, his first vision. This is a major moment.
Great.
Thank you, Alexander, for bringing that up. It really is a very
right. If we read the Midrash as Vayifein Kovacho, meaning he got divine inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh, was happening, correct. It's a pre-burning bush moment. It's his getting access to God's mind, not just his own mind. Great. Okay, Matt. Ulafib Shuto. Are you still there, Matt? You look frozen. Is Matt just very, very still, or is he frozen? Matt going once? Matt going twice? Sue, you want to take over? Ulafib Shuto.
Thank you. Ulafib Shuto.
Wait, I'm here. Hello?
Hold on.
Hello?
Yes, back, Matt. Okay.
Yes. Okay. First of all, with all respect to the drash, I don't buy it at all. I mean, the text says, and here's what Rashi's going to say, very clearly the story. I mean, it's not prophetic. On the contrary, I would argue that it shows how human Moshe is, and how immature and what a teenager he is to not realize that there are people around, and you actually go out and kill somebody.
Right. Of course, that's what the verse says. And of course, we have a Midrashic tradition. But your comment reinforces that the text reporting, Vayifein Kovacho, Vayar Ki Eish, that he looked around and he saw there was no man, that the facts that are delivered by that verse are undermined the next verse when it turns out, as you said, that clearly there was someone around because the story got out. So we're being told from Moshe's perspective that he did indeed declare it. He did look around and there was no man. If we read that to suggest that there was no man, meaning he could do it without getting caught, that is undermined in the next verse 2, which may be one of the reasons why the Midrash wants to see those words meaning something different. Because had he looked around and not seen and seen that there was nobody around, that he would not have gotten into the pickle he got himself into the next verse. But even so.
Or just as a way of presenting the story, he saw in his head that there was no one there, but that was a wrong analysis of the situation.
Correct.
And Yeah, I made my point. Ulefi pshuto kimishmao, and if you read the text on its simple meaning, it means what it says.
Yeah, it means what it says, right? Those of you who've been with the class for a long time know that, and I've said this many times, but it bears repeating, that most of the time Rashi does not tell you he's culling from midrashic material. He just gives you his information. Sometimes he does this, where he gives you a midrashic read, and then after that, he puts a semicolon and says, Ulefi pshuto, and according to the simple reading, it's this. Sometimes he reverses it. The first thing he says in a verse is, Ulefi pshuto, ... the kach midrasho, and this is the midrashic reading. And it's interesting to think through, in Rashi's mind, when he gives you both the pshat and the drash, does the order in which he gives it suggest which one he prefers? And we're just guessing. Does he leave us off with the one that he thinks should be the dominant idea of the verse, or does he lead off with the dominant one? Here he leads off with midrash and says, yeah, and here's what it means, I'm shot.
Right.
Sometimes he says, it means this, I'm shot, but here's a nice midrash I want to invite you into. Okay,
right.
That's the end of what he says. Yeah.
Right. I'd also like to doubt the connection of Shlomit Eshet Didri to this whole story. I mean, that's, as you pointed out last week, it's fetched from far away. It's far-fetched. I mean, how many examples of rape and miscegenation must there have been over anywhere between 200 and 400 years?
Yeah. Oh, wait, far-fetched is one of my favorite Yiddish words. Leo
far-fetched.
That's the most Yiddish of English words. Far-fetched and ladle. Okay.
All right. Moving on. V'yar ki ein ish. Atid latzet mimenu sheyit gayer. So he saw that there was no one, that there was no man. Atid latzet, it was to come from him that he would convert. It was destined that in the future he would convert.
Except that the way Rashi is reading this verse, the way he's commenting, you have to read the verse and the comment as one full sentence. Sometimes the comment begins its own sentence. Here he wants you to read it as Vayar ki ein ish atid latzeit mimenu she'it ga'er. So the ein ish goes through. Okay, so now try to translate.
All right, he saw that no one would be destined to convert from this.
What does that mean? What's going on in this comment?
Saw that there was no man destined to issue from him. Him? From which man? The man that he killed?
Right.
Well, clearly because he's dead, but I don't know.
It's a troubling little Rashi that comes from Shemot Rabbah, because the thinking and the morality suggested by this comment really flies in the face of most things that we would really hold on to. I see some hands up. Let's see some people who want to comment on that. What do you think is going on in this Rashi? Rick, Norm, Barry, Tova?
Hi. The thing that I wanted to say was about him looking back and forth, and I wasn't ready to comment on that. Sorry, but anyway, go ahead. Okay,
so hold that thought, Rick. Let's see if we can unpack what Rashi is saying here, quoting Midrash Rabbah. Norm?
I think what Rashi is saying is that he's able to look into the future and see this man who was the rapist and then abuser is not going to be the father of anybody who becomes an Israelite, and punishing him by killing him is okay. And so he proceeds to do exactly that. Yes.
That's essentially the pshat of the Midrash, right? That and just linger with it before you push against it, because it is a concept worthy of pushing against. And let's linger also on this notion, as we discussed before, of Moshe getting his first burst of Ruach HaKodesh. He sees the future. He sees the past. He saw what happened in this guy's house, what happened in the field. He sees the future. He has a window into like God's mind, right? Almost like I don't know why my brain went there. Like John Cusack having a window into John Malkovich's mind in the movie Being John Malkovich, where he sees through John Malkovich's eyes. Moshe seeing through God's eyes. And he sees that this Egyptian, right, is not going to be part of the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude of people, nor are his children who are going to come out of Egypt and join the Israelites. And so just hold your disgust. There's nothing lost in ending his life, right? Or think of it like Minority Report. Like if we kill him now, all we're doing is sparing more Jews from Israelites from being killed, and there's nothing positive that's going to come out of his line. By the way, it's not fun to think about, but pretty much every military decision made by every general is trying to think through, is killing this person or set of people going to save more people than it costs? That's unfortunately that's why war is so wicked, right? You know, to this day we still debate Truman's decision on Hiroshima, Lahavdil Elef Alfei Havdalot. There were articles about it last week because we hit the anniversary, and so many people saying that to look at the 140,000 or so, I think, who were killed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, intentionally fails to look at the million that some of the officials expected might have died on both sides had the war been allowed to continue. I don't want to debate that point. I want to say that this is in some ways still a salient thing that people have to think through. Here, though, it doesn't have to do only with how many more people this taskmaster will kill, but is there any redemptive part of his future? And to be an Egyptian in the Torah's eyes and the Midrash's eyes is not redemptive? No? All right, let's end it now. That indeed, Norm, is the pshat of the Midrash. And if it's troubling, it makes sense that it's troubling. All right.
Or is it a reference to that son that we read about that we talked about last week?
Yeah, I wondered that.
That half-breed?
Yeah. It's interesting to imagine that those two midrashim talking to one another. This one, I believe, is from Midrash Rabbah, and the main source for the other midrash about the Shlomit Bat Dibri, I think, was Tanchuma, if I'm not mistaken. So it's possible that they're in conversation with each other. The language here is weird, that there's no person who's going to come from him to convert. I know that our modern halachic understanding of conversion is different than the biblical notion, but the child of Shlomit Bat Dibri and this guy wouldn't have needed to convert. So it's hard to know if that's a reference to that. I got 5 hands up. Let's do Barry, Tova, Alexandra, Susan, Rick.
That last point was exactly where I was going, and you've already concluded it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Tova.
That was also where I was going, but I will add a little bit to it. Even if these two things are coming from different midrashic sources, Rashi has introduced us to the previous one. And what's suggested by this, that since there was a son that came of it, and it was a son who ended up in a fight, blasphemes God's name, and Moses condemns, it just seems like that had to be in Rashi's head. And so it's almost like saying at this point that Moshe prophetically knows that not only with this child, essentially, though technically a Hebrew, will in fact not be a true Hebrew, but that he's almost pre-condemning him at this point, which is troubling in a sense. Because rather than seeing Moses as a torn but true judge at that time, now he is foreseeing the nature of this.
Yeah, great. I'm going to correct myself because now that I look at another place, another version of Rashi that has more of the citations, both of these are from Shemot Rabbah, chapter 1 of Shemot Rabbah. So the comment about that he didn't see a person emanating from this line who's going to convert is from the same collection of midrashim. It's authored by the same rabbi, but the same collection of midrashim as the previous one. And what you said, Tova, is really evocative because you're right that we're killing this guy, And the one offspring that we know about, forget about whether or not he converts, is a blasphemer who gets killed, right? So it's almost as if his fate and his son's fate are somehow created in this exact moment. And by the way, and there's a lot about this in literature, that is the danger of thinking that you have Ruach HaKodesh, right? To have prophecy is a tremendous burden, because if you're pretty sure you know what's going to happen, then you act on it, and sometimes that seals people's fates that didn't deserve to have their fates sealed in that way. Alexandra, Rick, Rebecca, Sue.
My comment sort of has something to do with Renee's comment in the chat that I think it's important to look at Rashi's comment as troubling, and I also think it's important to look at it as not troubling, keeping in mind that we're a different generation and we sort of take morality for granted. And this was before the Torah, before morality was introduced to at least this portion of humanity. And so it's important to acknowledge that to not look at it by today's standard as, oh, he's converting, he's not going to be a Jew, or he's not going to be he's not going to see God in the same way. He's going to have offspring that are just terrible, that are like completely amoral human beings, because that was, as I understand it, the dichotomy of the world at the time. It was not, it was like, is there a sense of developing morality among you as someone who is, or is there none? It's not articulate, but I hope my point sort of got made.
No, of course it did. And whether we're assessing Moses and the Egyptian or Woodrow Wilson or anyone in between, we're always caught in the pickle of trying to figure out by which moral standards to judge them by. Right? And of course, when we're studying rabbinic text, we're actually seeing the layers of it, almost like James Michener and the Tell, because we're judging kind of with our understanding of the world, Rashi's treatment from 1,000 years ago, of rabbinic treatment 1,000 years before that, of text written 1,000 years before that, right? So, and 1,000 years is a long time to develop the human mind and the human soul. And so each layer of that treatment is being assessed from a different historical point of view, where we understood the interactions between people very differently than we do now. So I think that is an important point. And I still think it's okay to look at this comment of Rashi and imagine even kind of back tracing this decision of Moshe, whether or not to kill this person, based on whether or not someone someone Jewish would emerge from him, is a troubling thing. And I think it's okay to name it as troubling, or certainly to name it as something that would be troubling if that kind of a interpretation were either created today or, worse, wielded today. Right? Imagine someone wielding this interpretation, justifying some kind of a treatment of the non-Jew, because using this text to rely on, clearly the non-Jewish life is not as significant as a Jewish life, because had a non-Jewish life been as significant as Jewish life, it would not have been justified for Moshe to kill this guy. So I accept your comment, I really do. It's important to reckon with these ideas, because we are studying this text now and not studying it in the 11th century. Rick, Rebecca, Susan, Marshall, will we ever move forward? Doesn't matter. Rick.
Hi, thanks. So I wanted to go back to the shot, I guess, that he's defending this man who's about to be killed. So it's not like the Minority Report where they're predicting in the future, oh, he's going to kill somebody. He's killing somebody right now. And I like that Moses stood up for that. I also wanted to mention, when we're talking about Midrash, we skipped past, because of the brevity of the words, we skipped past Moses growing up in the palace, the Midrash where the magicians predict he's going to take Pharaoh's crown, and they put him in for the crown and the charcoal, and Gabriel pushes his hand towards the charcoal, and that's how he gets slow of speech. That was already gone, and now he's grown up. And I do want to reference the Ten Commandments again by Cecil B. DeMille, Charlton Heston, and I think it was Vincent Price who he kills. And he was killing somebody, and it wasn't self-defense, but it was defending the weak. And I really liked that part of the story. So justifying that, in the future he wasn't going to be that Jewish, that's not the point. The point is that he stood out from the Egyptian ruling class, and he tried to defend this slave.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick. Rebecca or Leonard.
Hi. I wanted to bring in a slightly different perspective, but before I do so, let me just quickly say that Yah, that the root of Yah is actually Nun Kaf He.
Okay.
All right. So Nechama Leibowitz makes an observation looking at this verse and the few that follow, that this is actually the first of 3 times that Moses intervenes to protect the victim to save the victim from the aggressor. In this particular case, it's a non-Jew afflicting the Jew. In the next case, it's going to be 2 Jews arguing with each other. And in the third case, where the well and the shepherds chase the daughters of, away from the well over there, he's protecting, again, the victim. In this case, it's a non-Jew being oppressed by non-Jews. And so I think the point that she's making is that one might assume from the first case, and maybe even from the second case, outsider versus a Jew or a Jew versus a Jew, that Moses might be doing this just for his own, trying to gain favor amongst his people there by saving somebody or by being, solving disputes and so on. But certainly the third case shows that this is actually in his nature over here, where he has absolutely nothing to gain. He's been banished from the kingdom, and yet he still believes that and what's right is right, and that he should be saving the one who's being oppressed.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful addition. Thank you, Leonard. In terms of the root, are you saying that even the verb lehakot in the infinitive and hika, hey, kaf, hey, that the root is nun kaf, hey?
That is correct. And the word makah, same thing. The root is nun kaf, hey. There is no hey, kaf, hey.
Great. Thank you for illuminating that. Sue and Marshall. By the way, that might be true in biblical Hebrew. I bet if you look up in a modern Hebrew dictionary, if you look up hey kaf hey as a past tense verb, it would be listed there as the shoresh. But it's interesting to think that it's like a pei nun verb with the nun dropped out so much that it doesn't even it almost doesn't appear. Right. All right. Go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, it was long ago, and Tova talked all about what I was going to talk about. So all good.
Okay. And Marshall.
I don't know what to make about the Hitgayer, but I'm just looking at the actual source in Shemot Rabbah, where it says, for Rabbanan Amri, the rabbi said, Ra'ah she'ein tochelet shel tzadikim. There is no expectation of righteous people, omdo heimenu, coming from him, v'lo mizaro ad sof kol hadarot, until the end of all the generations. So here we have the idea of tzidkaniyut, righteousness, as opposed to focusing on hitgayer conversion.
Does hitgayer appear in the midrash itself?
No.
Interesting. So unless there are other versions of that midrash, then Rashi is offering a midrash on the midrash by lifting the concept of righteousness from the rabbinic era, and it's Rashi the one who converts that into kind of a national or religious identification by saying the Hitgayer.
Well, we think of someone who's a ger tzedek.
Yeah.
Righteous convert.
Yeah. Thank you, Marshall. It's both, listen, it's always illuminating to know more, right? So when we can see the sources that Rashi depended on, we get a sense of his process, but it also shows you a bit more about how the sausage is made and what decisions Rashi was making in terms of which midrashim he quoted and which words he used, and and his own interpretive power and his own interpretive bias. So it definitely complicates things in an interesting way when we see the original sources from which he took his comment. Barbara? Hi, Barbara. You there, Barbara?
Yeah, I just had to get up to the top of the sheet. In the Silverman Rashi, he says he saw, no, wait, here, hold it. He saw that there was no man destined to issue from him who would become an adherent of Israel's religion. And then he says to confront Targ John, which I guess is Targum Jonah. I don't know if that adds anything to what you've been saying, because you've only mentioned the Rabbah.
So Targum Yonatan is one of three rather well-known and still used translations of the Torah into Aramaic. The one that we refer to is Onkelos, because that's the most well-known. But there was something called Targum Yonatan, which was a translation of the Torah into Aramaic by some guy named Yonatan. And there's also Targum Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem translation. And I believe that we don't have full extant traditions of both of those. And just like Onkelos, occasionally, and I think if I remember correctly, more frequently than Onkelos, Targum Yonatan goes from being just a translation to a commentary. So there are places where Targum Yonatan is giving you his interpretation of what he thinks that verse means, and not just the translation. So even in some annotated versions of Rashi, do we have it here? Does he give credit to Targum Yonatan? I'm looking. I have three different versions of Rashi in front of me, and some of them actually cite Targum Yonatan on this line that he was going to. He saw that no one was going to convert to Judaism from this line, quoting Targum Yonatan and not quoting the Midrash, which makes me think, going back to Marshall's point, that it may be Targum Yonatan who introduced the word hitgayer to be converted, even though it did not appear in the Midrashic material. But that's what that source means. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I see no more hands on this. Let's go to the next verse, and we'll at least get some momentum going on the verse before we have to move. Let's see, who we haven't not heard from yet today. Carol, do you want to read verse 13?
Okay, let me get my better microphone. Okay, are you hearing me okay?
Yep.
Vayetze bayom hasheni v'hine shnei anashim ivrim nitzim vayomer larasha lama takeh re'acha. And he went out on a second day, or the second day, and here were two people, Hebrew men. I don't know Nitzim. I'm assuming it's fighting. And he said to the evil one, why are you going to hit your friend?
Good. So excellent translation. Nitzim is not a very common Hebrew word. It's often translated here as to fight or to quarrel. And just pay attention to some of the words in the verse, and then we'll see what kind of question you have on it. So again, we have the word ish, but in plural. We have anashim. Okay. Notice just the beautiful alliteration of shnei anashim ivrim nitzim. It just kind of it reads nicely. And notice, I don't want to lead the witness, but notice the word rasha and the word re'acha in the verse. Rasha means the wicked one, and re'acha means your fellow, but more than your fellow, almost like your beloved one. Thing we talked about weddings at the beginning of this class. Sameach tesamach re'im ha'ahuvim. We say the sixth bracha, the Sheva brachot. God, bring great joy to your re'im ahuvim, your beloved loving partner. So a re'ah is an intimate way of referring to a fellow, right? So what do people think about the use of some of those words on that verse, or what questions would you ask on it? Floor is open to anyone, not just to Carol. Rebecca Leonard, Diane Larry, and Norm?
Yeah, how did he know which one was the evil one?
Right. It doesn't seem, in the previous scene, we have a taskmaster hitting an Israelite, so it's clear what the power dynamics are. We're introduced to these people as two people involved in a thing. Shnei anashim ivrim nitzim, two equals. So not only how did he know which one was evil, like what's to suggest that either of them was evil? So you can be sure that Rashi is going to want to figure out what the word Rasha is doing in that verse, because that is a pretty strong accusation. Great question. Larry, Diane.
Only going to comment that it invites midrash, or suggests that in fact there's a backstory here, which often, as we're reading the text, we want to think, or maybe don't want to think. I want to think that there is this backstory, and for whatever reason, it hasn't been included.
Yeah.
But you can go. What was the expression used last time? A rabbit hole, or some sort of. We can really go down it. We can dig a deep hole here about what this story is, besides the one that Rashi is going to go to.
Correct. Shnei anashim ivrim nitzim it's like you can move depending on which movie you want to go. You want to go Alice in Wonderland. It's a rabbit hole. You go Mary Poppins. It's a two-dimensional painting on the pavement. But if you were Dick Van Dyke and you could jump into that, who are these guys? What are they fighting about? There could be a carousel. There could be a derby with a horse race at the end of that pathway, right? And it's just flat in the text because it's a plot point really to help us understand something about Moshe, not about them, but it's almost like curiously and teasingly flat. Good. Anyone else? Marshall and Judy?
Just in the Rav Milim dictionary, the word nitzim has four meanings. It says, as a biblical term, it means to dispute, and it gives other meanings of to quarrel, to strive, and to struggle. So it seems to me that in the first one, they're starting to quarrel. I'm sorry, they're having a dispute. And then it gets hotter. They're quarreling with each other. And finally, they're struggling, and one is hitting, then finally one lashes out and hits the other person.
Yeah. Right. It is a little bit evocative of Cain and Abel, who are just out in the field, and all of a sudden there's a murder. How does that happen? How do people go from just being in the field and to bloodshed? I want to raise up what Rachel said about the previous verse, that because Rashi didn't comment on it, we didn't spend a whole lot of time on it, that burying him in the sand is a pretty loud scene in the verse itself, a pretty loud two-word image, and Rashi does not comment on it at all, and it doesn't seem to get a whole lot of treatment on the page, even beyond the Rashi. There's a few here and there. Okay, let's go to, a lot of hands. Let's do Marshall, Judy, Norm, Barry, and then we'll call it a day because we're basically over time. Marshall.
No, that was my comment.
Oh, that was yours. Okay, Judy.
So, that was your comment, Marshall? Okay, so I'm looking at the parallel between verse 11 and this verse with makeh and takeh. And it makes me think of this phrase, it's in the Gemara somewhere, about Nameh Yisraelim, that it's not just the Egyptians who are guilty of wicked behavior. It's within all of us, and it's a foreshadowing of what Moshe is going to have to deal with in the desert. There's going to be a whole lot of trouble up ahead, and it's not just the oppressor and the oppressed, but the infighting. It's a very interesting parallel to me.
Yeah, this idea as we're judging the Egyptian for Moshe to name, or for the Torah to name in Moshe's mind, and an Israelite as a Rasha is really interesting, right? And I hadn't thought about that from the angle you just mentioned, Judy, of a premonition of Moshe's entanglements with this stiff-necked people. They're not called Rasha in the desert. They're Amkshe Oref. But there is some Rishut there. There's some evil there as well. Good. A different direction than Rashi's going, but that's wonderful. Norm, last comment of the day.
I just think since we're dealing with a Rashi commentary, we automatically have to wonder just who are these two men that are fighting with each other? Yeah. And I suspect Rashi will tell us, at least his theory.
Rashi will tell us a little bit about it, but mostly Rashi is going to tell us Moshe's perception of these men and his decision to get involved. So let's end there. Next week, like this week, we'll start with the Rashi on the verse rather than the verse. And have a good week, everybody.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.